Good evening. We do have NRTA first tonight, so I'm going to call that meeting to order first, but I'll go through the remote script. We are using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise the hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised at the appropriate time in the meeting. As a preliminary matter, I'm Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Board members, Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
We will not have Melissa with us this evening, and I'm going to note a couple of changes to the agenda because of that. Staff members, Libby Gibson.
Present.
Jericho Mealy.
In attendance.
Tucker Holland.
Here.
William Pittman.
Here.
David Gray.
Here.
Holly Backus.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
Here.
Bob Eisenstein.
Here.
Paula Leary for NRTA. Paula, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Tom Rafter.
Here.
Mark Willett.
Here.
Rachel Day.
Present.
I see a couple of other people joining us tonight. We have John Giorgio from Town Council
Here.
and Valerie Oliver from the HDC.
Here.
Oh, and I see Brian Turbot is logging in right now. Hi, Brian.
Sure, sorry about that.
This open meeting of the Select Board and the Nantucket Regional Transit Authority will be conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive orders of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. However, we did lay out how we do feature public participation and public comment through the Zoom webinar functions. With this meeting being recorded, all attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share the screen of your computer unless you intend to. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless we note otherwise. The public is encouraged to follow along with the agenda. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, people can raise their hands for questions or comments. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly to generate accurate minutes. If you wish to engage in conversation between members, please do so through the chair and take care to identify yourself. And all of our votes will be taken via roll call. Before we turn to the NRTA agenda, on the Select Board agenda, we had under Select Board comments, review adoption of a modified committee appointment process. We've received some comments on these that need a little bit of review with the internal group that's working on it, which actually includes Melissa Murphy, who can't be with us tonight. So I'm going to put that item over until they've had a chance do that and see if they want to incorporate any changes. And also in regard to the discussion regarding return to in-person meetings and what that's going to look like, I think that we will touch on that tonight, but we'll probably continue that discussion for when we have a full board. So I just wanted to make those two notations. And before we get going with either meeting, I would like to turn it over to Libby Gibson, who unfortunately has some sad news.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is with deep sorrow that the town of Nantucket bids farewell to town employee Mark Voigt. Mark passed away unexpectedly on Saturday, May 1st. Mark and his family relocated to Nantucket in 2000 from St. Petersburg, Florida, where he worked as a city planner. He was initially hired as our HDC administrator. Mark's extensive background and passion for historic preservation were invaluable to the town of Nantucket and will be greatly missed. In 2004, Mark received his AICP certification, a certification that is shorthand for education, experience, breadth of knowledge, ethical practice, and commitment to the planning profession. Mark was an exemplary model for everything the AICP certification represents. He continued to improve himself and in 2008, he was recognized for completion of a public administration certificate from Suffolk University. In 2016, Mark transferred to the Department of Public Works as the facilities manager. Mark often visited staff in the field, making sure that they were properly supported with equipment, knowledge, and to ensure that the attention to detail that he expected was carried out. Mark was promoted to Deputy Director of Public Works for Facilities in 2020, the same year that he was recognized for 20 years of service to the town. Mark's volunteer activities on the island included the Nantucket Boosters Club, Nantucket Little League, where he held the positions of president, coach, and volunteer, Nantucket Scholarship Committee, Nantucket Community Preservation Committee, the Nantucket Rotary Club, and the Nantucket Boys and Girls Club, where he was a basketball coach. To his co-workers, Mark was known first and foremost as a family man. He maintained a consistent source of positive energy and support, remained always curious, and was a wealth of knowledge, particularly of Nantucket history. Mark will be greatly missed by his town of Nantucket family, and we extend our sincere sympathies to his family.
Thank you so much, Libby. When I worked for the town, I worked with Mark. We were both new to working in the HDC office. And then I also worked with him when he was the administrator and I was an HDC board member for many years. In addition, he coached my son alongside his in both Little League and in basketball. And I'm just in shock over this. And I just wanted to say that my thoughts are with you, Lucretia, Cooper, and Holbrook. And we will start our NRTA meeting. Paula, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'll see if there are any public comments first. Not seeing any hands. We can move to approval of minutes.
Oh, that was tough to follow. I
I
too
know.
have knew Mark for a very, very long time and was very sad to hear that news. And I do give my thoughts and prayers and love to Lucretia and the boys. So I have the approval of minutes from last week's meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Those carry unanimously. Next, approval of NRTA Administrator's FY22 salary and recommend for the NRTA's compensation, recommended by the NRTA's Compensation Committee.
I'm sure I'll let, we did meet and then Christy and Jason had some discussions and I think it's appropriate for one of them to report
Yes.
out on that, please.
Thank you, Paula.
Christy, I can, if you'd like.
Thanks, Jason.
Paula, so Christy and I met and talked about it, and we decided to suggest to the board a 2% increase. And Paula did ask for more than that. And I had a conversation with Paula today on why, and it's always difficult to have that conversation with somebody like, and in an open session like this. So we're suggesting a 2% increase.
Okay. Are there any questions from you, Matt, or any other comments from you, Christy, or a motion?
Move approval of the recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Next up, we have the approval of the FY22 operating budget as recommended by the NRTA's Finance and Audit Committee. Paula, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, Jason, Christie, and I met and we went over the budget. It is a balanced budget being presented to you. We are anticipating a normal, quote unquote, summer and are expecting to run our full service and probably more to deal with capacity issues. A little bit of that is represented in the budget. We will be adding, as you know, the 2 Fairgrounds Road Park and Ride Lot, and that funding will be included in the local assessment for the portion of FY21 and then FY22. The FY22 budget does include an amount for the 2FG lot service for May and June 2022. And then the other thing, the budget is basically normal. The other, or what we're used to, but we have CARES Act funding that covers any expenses COVID related or loss in revenue to make up that difference. It's a federal pot of money. So I just broke out. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with Mark. I just wanted to break out what portion is our normal 5311, which is our federal operating funding, and then how much we are anticipating in CARES Act funding, which flows through 5311. So you'll only see the 5311 total on the budget printout, but on the memo, it breaks up the different amounts.
Does anybody have any questions on the budget? Jason?
Paul addressed it, but I just want everybody to know that, there was a shortfall because of the pandemic, but the CARES Act really came in and covered a lot of that loss, if not all of it.
Yep, all of it.
Yeah.
And we still have more if we need
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Matt?
Yeah, earlier in the winter, I was asking about ridership numbers by hour, by ride. I'm not sure we ever got that. If we did, I haven't seen it. But just, Paula, are we tracking better now? How close are you to, year before last? And are your projections for this summer, what do you project?
Yeah, I never did get you that because it's an extremely time-consuming process. Projecting for this summer, more normal than last summer. This winter, of course, up until recently, with some of the restrictions being lifted, people traveling, workers actually coming this year, we've seen an uptick in that, what I'm going to call winter ridership. There's discussions at the state and the federal level and different transit groups around how long is it going to take public transit nationwide, not just us, but to bounce back to what we were before the pandemic. From a ridership perspective, from an operation perspective, how do you gain the public confidence back and all of that? So I think it's going to be a slow build to what we were used to pre-COVID and the numbers that we were seeing, but I think it proved that, public transit is an essential service that the community relies on. We're going to be dealing with capacity and demand issues, I think, this summer. and hoping to get back to a little more of normal with it.
Go ahead, Matt.
Right, well, it shouldn't, then we have to work on, it shouldn't be that difficult to know how many people are riding and when they're riding. If we can't do that, then we need, we as a, as a board for this need to request some work on that. Because part of this, Paula, is if you're saying we're going to have capacity issues in the summer, maybe we should be reallocating some of the other, some of the winter service, having it happen just when it's needed and pushing it to the summer service. But we can't make that determination without that information. And I know you guys, you have a good feeling for it and look at it, but I want to just make that point, that we need to understand that and be confident that that's fully happening. Number one. Number two, just because it's CARES Act or the state's giving us money doesn't mean that we, in my opinion, I'm pretty conservative, doesn't mean that we need to spend it. And it doesn't mean that that's the right thing. So anyway, I think it comes from us somehow eventually, just because it comes from the state, it's going to come from us before it gets to the feds or the state to come back to us. So we should be, as smart and as efficient as we can be.
Matt, would you be in favor of me hiring someone part-time to be able to do that?
Possibly, but I can't imagine that with technology the way it is, I can tell you how many sandwiches we made in what time, and we just put that in a couple of years ago. So maybe, but I'm not, if that's necessary. But if that can be, if there's a way, maybe we have someone come in and help show us how to do it.
I know how to do it. I know how to do it. It's just an extremely time-consuming process.
Well,
And
I think that Matt's trying to get at, is there a technology available that doesn't make it a time-consuming process? I mean, I could pull up data on how many shirts came in on any given day all year, and what time and so forth. So is there a technology that we're missing that maybe that would be the
investment?
investment?
Not the technology that we're missing, it's the secure fare box system that we use that tracks every single transaction. I can go in and sort that, but it's time consuming. If I print a day in July, it's going to be 123 pages. And if I print it by hour, it's going to be 12 pages. So it's not that the technology and the information isn't necessarily there. It's just a process, because you need to remember the fare box isn't just counting the people, it's controlling and internally controlling the cash and the systems put in place to protect that. So
So it doesn't generate reports.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
But it doesn't compile the information for you.
It will, but it's going to be 23 pages of information. I'll run a couple sample reports and show you guys what the reports look like. There's different reports for different things. So I can certainly do that.
Matt, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah,
and Matt, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. No, Paul, and I'm trying, and there has to be some way to do this. And how do we make, prudent policy decisions without that information? When someone comes and tells me all I see all winter are empty buses, what do I say? I'd love to be able to say, yeah, they look kind of empty, but they're not, because they're used at this time to that time, and they've increased X% this year, and they're projected to increase more. We need to, need to be able to say that and justify what we're doing.
Well, when people say that, I would love for you to have them get in touch with me, because it'll be interesting. It's always interesting when people say that, where they see the bus, what time they see the bus. It's an interesting dynamic. So I would be very interested in knowing those times, and then I'm happy to respond to those kind of questions you get. but I understand where you're coming from when you get hit with that.
Okay. Is there any other business? Did we vote on the budget? I'm
No,
sorry.
again, I was
lost
just
track
gonna
for a
say.
second. Can I have a motion to approve the budget?
Move approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. And I don't know if there's any other business before we.
I would just like to take a moment to recognize the drivers, the managers, the entire team beneath me that makes this system work so smoothly and so well for so many people. COVID was a scary time for them as well, and being told that they were essential workers to be out there when everyone else was staying home was a bit unnerving. We listened to their concerns. We immediately implemented measures that would make them feel safe, but they did a great job for us. They were out there every day. They were cleaning buses, getting people, I mentioned we served the vaccination site. So I would just like to commend all those people that work for me and with me on an excellent job and for hanging in there with us during a really, really difficult time.
Thank you, Paula. Please pass on that we really appreciate everything that they do too. And it's been a very tough year. It's I find it to be a very essential service. My kids have learned how to use the bus. We have employees that use the bus that work for my husband, and they really rely on it.
And I think that's the important thing to take away of what we do. That people rely on it, they need it, and it works for them. So thank you for those comments.
Thanks for being here, and we will adjourn the NRTA meeting. Can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. And then we will move on to convening the May 5th Select Board meeting at 5:23. I already noted that on the agenda under Select Board comments, we are going to take off number 2, review adoption of modify committee appointment process for further review. And other than that, we will move to announcements. Libby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we all know the first one already. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. Our 2021 committee, board, and commission vacancy process is underway. We are welcoming applications for a variety of committees. They are all posted online. We have our first introduction of committee applicants at the board's meeting of June 2nd. And there's a timeline process on the website and in the packet as well, which sort of outlines a bit of a modification from prior years following the board's discussion about committee appointments last summer, which I know we'll be talking about again sometime in the near future. And the names of applicants who have submitted applications will be read aloud on June 2nd as well. The applications will be in the board's packet. There will be a second opportunity for this on June 9th, and committee appointments will be made by the board on thank you, Erica, on June 23rd. And there's lots of information online, and we really hope that we'll get a lot of new applicants this year. We're doing some outreach on that. Next, we have an announcement about a general information meeting about town meeting, which, as we know, starts on Saturday, June 5th. This is a public informational session, and it's about the setup and procedures, not about the warrant articles, just if people have questions about where town meeting is, what it's going to be like outdoors under tents with no projection screen, what they can expect, things of that nature. So this is taking place by Zoom on Tuesday, May 18th at 5 p.m. And the information to join is on the agenda and also online. The Surfside Road Sewer Improvement Project. David Gray, do you have a quick update?
I do. Thank you very much, Lee. The project's moving along well. We have run into numerous unmarked services here and there, which has slowed us down somewhat. There is one change to the project that will be going into effect as of next week. We are going to be dropping the Sunday night work. So it'll be only Monday through Thursday night work, with Fridays being for paving. We want to be able to maintain the waiver for Sunday nights if we need it later on in the project. But as of right now, we're going to be switching over to just Monday through Thursdays, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. night work. And then Fridays, they will be doing the paving. Other than that, things have been going pretty well.
Thank you, David, very much. Thanks for overseeing that project. I have one quick item that isn't on the agenda because it came in a bit later, but the Waite Drive construction, which runs from Tacoma, and ultimately it'll go through to Old South Road, but for now it will end behind the 246 Fairgrounds Municipal Complex. This construction of Waite Drive is scheduled to begin next Monday, May 10th, starting at 8 a.m. And there is also another component to this project, which is a bus pull-off and sidewalk connection to Fairgrounds Road from the driveway of the 2 Fairgrounds Municipal Building off of Old South Road. And that hopefully will be completed relatively quickly. And Waite Drive, looking at the timeline here, the work is expected to continue through summer and fall and be completed by the end of the calendar year. Hopefully it'll be much earlier than that. There may be limited disruption in the immediate area, and we have a website established. This will be, there's a notice in the paper, and on the town website you can locate, it's a web page for this project specifically, and it's all on the town website. And I think that is it for town admin announcements.
I just added one additional announcement tonight to recognize how thorough and detailed the review that the Finance Committee does always and did this year, with keeping it organized during COVID and doing everything on Zoom and working through all the town articles. When we were making our comments a couple of weeks ago, some citizens raised, some question about the review process, and I just wanted to note that I found it very thorough and really appreciate all of the work that they did. I did not see any flaws in how they ran their meetings and gathered information and reviewed it, and we really appreciate them volunteering and putting all of that time and energy into the process that's so important for town meeting. So, next up, we have our COVID-19 weekly update, opening public comments. Anyone's welcome to raise their hand. Otherwise, I will turn it over to our Human Services Director, Jericho.
Good evening. Nice to be back. Today, I'm going to be focusing primarily on improvements to access to the vaccine. The last several weeks have been a fun roller coaster in terms of vaccine supply issues, but it appears that we have passed through a bit of a bottleneck, and vaccine supplies are increasing significantly. And now we're going to be trying to find some more innovative and effective ways to get vaccines to people who have not been able to get it yet. Our current slate of access processes is right now we have a number of volunteers who are doing call-ins for the existing VFW system for people who do not have time or effort or the ability to get signed up for themselves during open scheduling. That is being conducted through my office and through various volunteer organizations. If you are interested in taking advantage of that and you are a business owner, you can feel free to email me directly. You can find my email on the town website. And then in addition to the scheduling assistance, there are a variety of direct-to-business vaccine clinics that are potentially going to be deployed both through the town and through NCH. Anyone interested in participating in either a drive-through, a walk-in, or potentially an on-site vaccination clinic should email the hospital at nchvax@partners.org. That's nchvax@partners.org. Let them know that you are a business owner and that you would like to try and set up some sort of vaccination program with them. Additionally, the town and the hospital are investigating a variety of different pop-up clinics and educational opportunities to address fears and concerns people may have about vaccine safety or about vaccine supply issues. Those are going to be popping up ongoing and probably continuing for several weeks to help address people's issues around hesitancy. And then finally, we'll be doing probably some, a couple of different ambassador events. We'll be looking to get testimonials from people who have had the vaccine and from experts on the particular topics. And then, of course, trying to focus as much on, making it linguistically and technically comprehensible to everybody on the island. Those are the basic categories of our vaccine access assistance efforts, and they're going to be expanding pretty effectively as we get continuing supplies of vaccine. The island has got its first allotment of Johnson & Johnson. We have continuing availability of Pfizer. The long-promised faucet has opened, and we are starting to get pretty significant amounts of vaccine as necessary. And then I believe that's it. If there's any specific questions on any of these programs, I'll be happy to field them.
Does anybody have any questions? Matt?
Not a question, just a couple things for you to think about, Jericho, as you go forward. I know there were places like Act Dental that were registered and able to give vaccines, but there wasn't enough for them to do it. If you can get that to them and to others like them, that would be really helpful, because they'll be running different hours and and different people. That would be great. The other one is, if the hospital or you guys could make it easier for, I have had summer staff that have returned to the island, had one shot already. They had to get their second. And when they called up and asked, geez, what do I do? You're on a waiting list. Well, when do we get it? We don't know. So 3 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by, and they just, they had to go off island and get it. They said, you know what, so they had to leave the island, take the day off and the time and the expense. If we have enough vaccine now, my suggestion is people in that circumstance should be sort of plugged in with the right vaccine so that they don't have to do that. That's a huge inconvenience. And that'll keep people from getting their second shots, which are important for all of us.
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely. And actually, I'm very glad that you brought that both of those points up, because I forgot to tell, we have a couple of other vaccine partners. Health Imperatives on the island will be receiving some vaccine to work into their regular process. Then I believe Dan's is increasing their supply. The thing is with Dan's source of vaccine is different than the hospital. So Dan is getting Moderna when the hospital is getting primarily Pfizer, and now a trickle of J&J. And a lot of those second dose issues were around the fact that there were second dose of Modernas, and we did not have Moderna on hand. Or if we did have Moderna on hand, you need to have the vials come in doses of 10. You need to have multiples of 10. And now we're actually working with Dan's Pharmacy to see if there's a process that can sort of tie him into that to help clear up the inventory management problems that have been really difficult to iron out. But yeah, those are also excellent points. I think the total number now, I think Act Dental Arts is going to start receiving vaccines shortly. I know that they will be having a same-day PCR testing machine installed up and running. I think tentatively that was going to be some point this week. Again, anytime you are doing any sort of COVID testing, the optimal solution is a PCR machine. It's like gives you clinical verification. So that is another option for same-day responses. I believe that's going to be by appointment only. And then we have Health Imperatives, which I mentioned, and then any other vaccine providers who are starting to get vaccine would like to be added to the town resource list. Please feel free to give me an email, and I will I'll get you on the town vaccination resources page as soon as possible.
Christy?
Sorry if I just missed this, but could you clarify if you're able to get your second shot here on the island if you got it elsewhere?
That is an extremely difficult issue because of the difficulty in sourcing the matching type of vaccine and then getting the people in groups where we can open it without wastage. That is something that they can absolutely try to do, but they just simply cannot give a guarantee for a second dose that was not issued through the hospital.
Thank you. If there's no other questions for Jericho right now, I forgot to mention that we will not be doing an economic task force update this week. Those are going to every other week. And I did, while we're talking, also want to ask the board if we want to move our COVID-19 weekly update to an every other meeting, unless obviously something significant transpires, which hopefully things will run more smoothly now. But are there any thoughts on that?
Madam Chair, I kind of want to, I want to go that route, but I don't know if we're there yet with so many things happening and the season getting ready to start. I think maybe we could try that in June. Or just keep it on, and if there's nothing there, go through it quickly.
That's good feedback. Matt?
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I think if, at least having it to be able to talk about issues, so one of the things, I had a bunch of people, just as just an example, but I had a couple different restaurants say they're having a really difficult time now that the mask order has been lifted. And the reason they are is that the customers are not, now that they're showing up without masks, they were already kind of surly anyway. And now they're kind of, basically the oversight has been shifted slightly from, hey, you have to wear it when you're downtown, to now it's a responsibility of these restaurants who are, struggling to get staff and are struggling to have people comply with 3 or 4 other rules when you're inside. And, it's a very difficult situation. So, maybe that'll shake out over time, but the first couple weekends first weekend was very rough.
And I would just like to mention that the mask order has not gone away. The outdoor masking, when you can maintain distancing, has gone away, and that there are still there is still a responsibility for people. Just like you have to wear shirts, pants, and shoes when you go into a place, you also need to wear a mask when you go into any public place.
Christine?
Thanks. I was just going to agree with Jason and Matt with keeping it on the agenda, at least for the next couple of weeks as we lead into summer. And then we can talk about going to every other week.
That sounds like a good plan.
And then
we'll just continue to rotate between Jericho and Roberto.
And then very briefly, if there are no other vaccine access questions, I did want to mention very briefly the infection rates on the island have continued to decrease. Our 7-day rolling average is, I believe, below 5% today. And then we just got our BioBat viral load sewage sample tests back in. They are also quite promising. So I think the combination of vaccination rates, increased weather, and then sort of just people being a little bit more aware of it has done a pretty good job of containing that last surge. We will be seeing, if we do see a spike from the most recent vacation, it will be showing up over the course of this week and into early next week. But the BioBot leading indicator, which has been fairly robust in terms of its signal to noise ratio, suggests that we may have hit the peak of this particular surge. So yeah. There we go.
What kind of numbers is it saying?
BioBot is, I believe, predicting between 5 to 7 a day. Let me just double check to get that number correct.
So that's very good. I mean, in terms of where we were at.
The BioBot, from what I've seen of it, the BioBot is very good at showing the direction of change, and that it is somewhat more difficult to give you an absolute measure. But if we look at the relative sample, we were for a very long time at the highest rate of sewage rates, as that that BioBot has sampled nationwide and regionally. We are now well below the median, and we are doing significantly better in the infection rates. But I do think that the movement of stop the spread to appointment only and the decrease in total numbers means that the testing results are probably not the most accurate they possibly can. But I do think that the combination of the testing results and the BioBot results say that we are doing better than we were a few weeks ago at the very least.
And Jericho, is it tracking the variants?
The variant test requires a couple of additional steps. At this point, everyone who does PCR testing for COVID has got it down to a science, and they know exactly which particular gene sequences they need to target. But for identifying variants, they have to run a further sequence. It usually takes a couple of extra days. As of the last variant study or variant test run that I saw, it was about 60% of the viruses in the sewage system that they sampled were of I think it was the UK variant, the more transmissible variant. So it is pretty safe to say right now that heirloom COVID is the minority of COVID on the island, and the vast majority is the variants, of which the more rapidly spreading UK variant is probably the primary one.
Thank you. That's helpful. Are there any other COVID comments tonight? I don't see any public hands raised. I'll move on to public comment for items not related to COVID-19 or otherwise not on our agenda for discussion. I'm not seeing any hands raised. There's no additional new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, payroll warrants, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments on anything? Or can we go to a blank? Oh, Jason, Christy, and Matt.
I only had one suggestion to for the Dreamland renting that space to move that to another week. I had a lot of questions, and I thought we could do that and give Dreamland a notice. I wouldn't want to change anything. I have questions without them being here to be a part of it. So I would, if everybody's ready, I would make a motion for everything except that. But I know everybody else had their hands up.
Christy, then Matt.
Yeah, I had similar comments about looking at the contract for the Dreamland. And so I'd be comfortable with waiting another week and being able to review kind of what is a fair market price for that contract, and maybe what we are doing going forward.
Matt?
Yeah, mine wasn't about the Dreamland, but I'm fine with moving that to next week. That's fine. It's there was Saltine Warrior for salt for the town, and I'm just wondering how much did we really use this winter, and do we need all of this, or is this just, if we don't need it all, does it stay and roll over?
This is only adding $143 to the contract. Maybe Brian can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually, we used all 109,560 that was on the contract, Matt. The salt shed is actually pretty full at this point in time, so we will carry that into next year. This is just adding to the contract to be able to pay the small overage that was needed.
Right, and that, yeah, the 143, I'm fine. I'm just wondering where we stood, because it wasn't a very, cold winter, and I assume we should be in pretty good shape.
I think the salt shed currently is approximately just about 2/3 full at this point. So that will be available for next year.
All right, great, thanks.
Alicia Carney does have her hand up, so I'll take a comment if that's all right.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I just wanted to note that I was on the line in case there were any questions, but if you do feel we should move to next week, I'm happy to do that as well.
I think we will just move that. If I can just have board consent to move that item to next week, and then I'll take a motion on everything else.
So moved.
Oh, Erica?
Sorry, we don't have pending contracts scheduled for next week. Are we going to add this to pending contracts? Like, are we going to add that section, or are we going to push it off till the 19th, which is our next date?
We're going to do it next week, and we'll just have one pending contract.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Second.
So all those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fay,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That all carries unanimously with that one contract extended to next week. Um, Next up, we have some gift acceptances. Natural Resources, Human Services.
Motion to approve and send a letter of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests. Police Department recommended amendments to Town of Nantucket Parking Enforcement Plan. I believe Chief Pittman is here to discuss this.
Good evening. Every year the police department, as we do our enforcement downtown, there's two different policy documents that the board has put forth over the years. One's for summer enforcement, one's for winter enforcement. And it's been a while since that's been updated. And before we start training the new crop of CSOs, I wanted to get a couple of things modified on here. And basically, the biggest issue is bringing the times in to coordinate them with the NRTA's bus schedule, especially for the 2FG parking lot. So the document that I put forth here changes the, in paragraph 1A on page 2, it changes the last stop from 7:20 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Labor Day rather than Columbus Day, which was what it was in the past. The second changes and the third change are just renumbering, and fourth, fifth change are just renumbering of the subsequent paragraphs. Then after that, on the summer enforcement program, in paragraph, which is on page 4, on paragraph 1C, there had been some discussion by the board in the past about changing the hours of enforcement downtown. And I just want, before we publish this, I just want to make sure that the way it is correct, or to see if you wanted to change it. Currently, enforcement is from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you do change it, it's going to require additional staffing, and we are having some trouble getting full staffing on CSOs this summer. And the next change is in paragraph 2 of that same page. Again, it changes the NRTA fast ferry schedule to from the Friday before Memorial Day through Labor Day. And that's it. It's only changes we're needing and recommend.
Christy?
Thank you. The Economic Task Force had talked about parking regulations, and I just wanted to provide some of the feedback that those on the task force felt that keeping it at 7 made sense, keeping it in line with previous years. They felt that if we are short-staffed, it could be better utilized having staff, helping restaurants or maintaining capacity versus enforcing parking. And also just the cost to replace signs didn't seem like the best use of money at this time. So I just wanted to pass that input along from the Economic Task Force.
Are there any other comments?
Okay.
Matt?
I'll wait for the chief. He has a comment, right?
Go ahead.
Well, it's my understanding, I think there's a little misperception about what the CSOs do. My understanding on the Economic Task Force, there was a member of a bar, an owner of a bar restaurant downtown that was concerned about the slow police response time to issues that he was having. And we could have 100 CSOs that wouldn't help that, because they don't deal with bar problems. They deal with parking and parking enforcement. They have no authority, no legal authority, nothing to deal with anything that would potentially be confrontational like that. So that's, we send police officers to those types of things. And just so you know, this year, something we're doing a little differently than prior years was we are going to have an overtime officer assigned to the downtown area at every night And so there'll always be an officer down there on foot. And we're going to have the shift officers, when available, dedicate their non-committed time to the downtown area to deal with those issues.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think that's great to know that there's going to be a presence down there. I think it's going to be wild this summer. And I watched last summer, and when the kids saw Amy showing up with the town, they all scrambled. So I think just that is going to help, the downtown, the restaurants immensely. That having bodies there at the busiest times is amazing. So just when I looked at thinking about the parking part of it, I kind of agree with Christy. What's the point of changing it for an hour? If you got to change all the signs. But from a staffing perspective, if you just started an hour later, couldn't the same people be doing it? And you start 1 hour later every day and finish, 1 hour later? Would that be a way to do it with the same amount of staff?
I mean, we certainly could do it. What we found in the past, though, is what happens if you start later, and actually 8 o'clock is almost too late. Then we get behind all the people who are coming down there and parking, going to work. So, there's no enforcement at first. They park, they don't see anybody. So, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But that is a way we could do that. And we probably would if you had elected to enforce later in the night. We would have probably made some adjustments to the hours that the individuals are working to accommodate that.
Matt?
Yeah, Chief, did you guys use license plate readers last year? Do you have that data? Did that work for you?
We have some data. There was 4 units that were deployed down there. We have them. I haven't looked at the data for some time on there, but they will be deployed again this summer as we move into the summer.
Right.
Matt?
I think there's actually a guide on it right now.
Yeah, and that's great because sort of what I think about how I look at this, I almost think we should be doing a policy of having 8 or 9 or one or 2 spaces out of 10 being opened, at all the different areas at any one time. And then these things should be adjusted so that happens. And, in order to do that, you have to have the data and understand what the data says for the different areas and when. And, and we should have a parking commission. So, because we don't have time to hash this out on a huge, long agenda on a Wednesday night. There should be, in my opinion, I've pushed this for a number of years now. There should be a group that's working on this. I think, you don't want people parking all day, but you also don't want the nighttime employees to know they can come into certain streets at 3, 4 in the afternoon and park all night. The data that was collected from Remain a few years ago showed that we were like 110% parked after 4 or 5 at night, most nights of the week. It was the most that the consultants had ever seen, and it's not as busy during the day, especially when it's sunny out. So, I think, how do we allocate it? Where do we allocate it? We don't have time to figure that out tonight, but I think, we're heading the right direction with license plate readers. And I think we're heading the right direction if we could get, you get a parking commission that would look at this, work with the chief, work with the police and help do this. So we're getting recommendations that are a little more granular than we're getting now.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, Mr. Mancher. So our program is we were building before COVID hit, focused around us hiring a parking coordinator whose job was to do that very thing. And we were using as a model Barnstable, which has a parking staff that deals with parking enforcement, but they have the flexibility within their rules to make adjustments like that. For instance, they have parking lots that their goal is to make revenue in the parking lots. So the staff, depending on how they see the usage, like there may be certain times of the day that they notice there's more demand than there is parking, they have the flexibility to raise the rates within certain parameters on that. Or let's say there's an area that's being underutilized, they have the ability to even make on-the-spot decisions, not, and by on the spot, I mean within, real quick turnaround, to lower the parking costs there to try to encourage more people to park there. If they have all the street spaces taken up, they have the flexibility to make whatever change needs to happen to get to that, 10% availability limit. That's what we were shooting for. But until we get a parking coordinator who understands that stuff, it probably won't happen. Because I looked at the data, we get. It means nothing to me. I might as well be reading a Greek book. Those are just numbers, and I don't know what that means. I never was trained to do that for that purpose. But there are people that can, and that's what we're shooting for, eventually, to have that person here. I think a commission would just be, it might be an added enhancement for changing regulations, but I think if we change the regulations to give the parking enforcement staff, you set the policies, what you want revenue, you want open spaces, you want whatever, then it's up to the staff to implement the different strategies to achieve those policy goals.
Yeah, Don?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that, and I agree with all that, and that's great. I think we're part of the importance of a commission is to have various public voices from, so there are various stakeholders here that all need to, be sort of, need to be included. And it's one of the problems sometimes when the nighttime crews come in and park is that the people in the neighborhoods can't park anywhere near their homes anymore. They've got the ability to park, but they can't. And so, whatever we do has to be, treating the neighborhoods has to be considering all the neighborhoods, the downtown parking, and the employees. It has to be sort of a combination of all of those. And so having a broad group representing the different interests, I think would be helpful. It's hard for us sitting here on a Wednesday night again, or, to make those determinations.
Well, I'm looking forward to having hopefully a more normal summer to evaluate how the license plate readers are working a little bit better. It seems like those should help with the enforcement and the turnover, but I guess we will see, and we will continue from there. And hopefully the park and ride helps alleviate some of the logistics for employees parking. Can we make a motion to accept those alterations?
So moved.
Are we clarifying? Are we keeping it at 7?
Yeah.
I'll second.
As recommended. Okay. All those in favor by roll call? Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Nat Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Ron Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Finance Department request for approval to increase FY 2021 airport aviation fuel revolving fund spending limit, and B, request for approval to increase FY 2021 municipal aggregation operation added revolving fund spending limit. Brian Turcott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first request is, as we get closer to the end of the year, the airport approached us. We did ask previously to amend the authorized limit and moved it to 3.5 million, given the fact that the end of May through the end of June is sometimes some of their busiest times, and they need to ensure that they have fuel on hand to service the jets that land and are taking off. They asked if we could consider increasing the cap from 3.5 million to 4 million. They don't expect that they won't go over the 4 million that's statutorily authorized if you agree to raise the cap, but they would like that flexibility because they are expecting it to be busier during that month. Given the 4th is on a weekend again, there probably will be a lot of travel at the end of June coming in or leaving. So I will note, as I noted in the AIS, the FinCom has already reviewed and discussed this and has approved, voted to approve the increase. So we're asking for the same authorization from you.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. And
So Madam Chair, the operational adder, which is funded through the municipal aggregation program that we have, the energy coordinator, in discussion with myself, we noted that the expenses this year were just over 90,000. And there's still some solar rebates in the that are planned, and potential opportunities for some other energy saving expenses that could potentially come from the adder. The cap was approved at the 2020 town meeting for $100,000. The cap going to the 2021 annual town meeting is the 150 that we're asking it to be raised to for this year. So again, we did discuss this and reviewed this request with FinCom, and they did favorably recommend this. So we're asking for the same recommendation and authorization from the board tonight.
any questions on this increase? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, we have Historic District Commission update on the Resilient Nantucket Design Guidelines through a Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant. Holly Backus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody for having me this evening to update you on this Resilient Nantucket Design for Adaptation MVP Action Grant project. For those of you that may not be aware, the town of Nantucket, through our hazard mitigation project, or update, I should say, went and included our cultural resources within our hazard mitigation plan. And that was something that I had the fortunate opportunity to go and see the first Keeping History Above Water conference in Newport in 2016. And I heard this lady from Annapolis, Maryland, talking about putting your cultural and historical resources within your hazard mitigation plan. At the time, our hazard mitigation plan was needed to be updated, and I was happy to be included in that process. So I came back to Nantucket and presented to the select board. We need to do that. So we did just that, and in September of 2017 through March 2019 is when we updated the hazard mitigation plan. We had about 55 strategies that were approved from the hazard mitigation plan. And 2 of them were targeted towards our historic cultural resources, following the FEMA guidance. These 2 particular items, along with the MVP Action Grant project, where we did the Community Resilience Building Workshop. I'm sure there's folks out there who remember that event that we had for about 8 hours. This was basically for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness through the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. It really puts Massachusetts at the top of resiliency planning. And out of that workshop that we had about 10 different priorities that came out of it. One of them in particular being our coastal resiliency coordinator, who obviously, you know, we have the pleasure of working with, Vince Murphy. But the other one that was targeted towards our historic structures was creating historic design guidelines for making sure that we're adapting appropriately. So we did that, and in July of 2019, we actually received that action grant. And due to Nantucket being, I guess another way to say it is unique, I was offered to speak to the Preservation Massachusetts conference about Nantucket in our resiliency and preservation efforts. This was September of 2019. And really, there was a lot of folks just in awe of how Nantucket included our preservation and our conservation folks within the resiliency efforts that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is putting forth. And we've actually been showcased as a best practice for that, which I thought was pretty cool. So as you all are aware, we had a little bit of a lapse in time as far as getting started, but we had our original kickoff, which was in person down at Fairgrounds Road, where I know we all haven't been there in quite a while. And we had this with our consultants, Lisa Craig from the Craig Group and Thomas and Associates, Phil Thompson. Then due to COVID itself, we kind of, had to reschedule our events with the help of obviously Finance Department, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as our consultants. We kind of had to tweak the contracts to kind of make sure we're moving forward. And I commend and thank the town, as well as our consultants and the Commonwealth, for that matter, for working with us to making sure that we could actually accommodate having virtual meetings. But one of the greatest things that came out in November of 2019 was guidance for historic districts from the National Park Service. They came out with the guidance on flooding adaptation for rehabilitating historic structures. This couldn't come out at a perfect time. This is the additional basically guidance that historic districts all across the country have been looking for. And this is what the basis of our Resilient Nantucket, as well as our Coastal Resiliency Plan, is going to include. So again, the MVP Action Grant project, specifically for Resilient Nantucket, had basically being built upon that workshop that was done through the MVP. Really, Massachusetts, again, is a front runner in this, and I hope our representatives realize that. And of course, it built upon the hazard mitigation plan and those two different priorities that were outlined. And then it also built upon the Resilient Nantucket 3D digital documentation and sea level rise project that was through a CZM grant that the town of Nantucket jointly received with the University of Florida's Preservation Institute Nantucket program. And as you all remember, that was showcased at the 2019 June, I think it was, Keeping History Above Water. I was very happy to be able to bring, with the help of a lot of different people, the Keeping History Above Water to Nantucket after seeing it in Newport. So that was a great event, and we couldn't thank the University of Florida Preservation Institute Nantucket, their program. They're the ones who came up with that tagline, Resilient Nantucket, and you're not going to see that go away. And of course, we have the 3 deliverables for this action grant. One is the design guidelines that are before the HDC right now in draft form, hopefully to finalize those soon. And then a toolkit for all property owners, not just historic property owners, but all property owners. That is, I'm waiting for that final copy to have available on the town's website through the MVP page that we have, resilientact.org. And then, of course, we had a lot of different virtual conferences, forums, charrettes, you name it. We had those through our consultants. So the first one we had was a FEMA workshop, which was preparing our historic property for future rising seas. We were very fortunate. This was in September of 2020. We had folks from MEMA. We had some representatives from Barnstable County who are floodplain specialists and also dealing with historic structures. And then we also had a representative from Rogers and Gray Insurance who handles a lot of the National Flood Insurance program and handling all sorts of different questions that came their way. Of course, I want to give a shout out to NCTV. I've done that so many times as I possibly can because we wouldn't have been able to do any of this effort without them. as well as I think the town agrees with that. We wouldn't have been able to survive this past year. And then, of course, we had some community charrettes in November. This was basically our consultants is a dual team. Phil from Thomas and Associates and Lisa from the Craig Group. And Phil is the one who does the design guidelines. He's been doing design guidelines for many, many years. And of course, I know he was very happy for that National Park Service guidance that came out. As you'll see in the photo before you is our C Street pump station. I have let David know and his consultants for the work that they've done on that 1923 pump station. That is being showcased as a best practice for adapting a pump station that's historic for rising seas, for flooding. And Phil is actually utilizing it, not only be showcasing it within our design guidelines for the HDC, but he's also been showcasing it at certain events. He is a trainer for the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions. I believe he's on the board as well. He's also been working on a lot of different resiliency and preservation groups and what have you. So he's been showcasing Nantucket, and I think that the town should realize that we've been doing good this whole time, which is great for a town owned structure. So we also had some events in January. This was an HDC meeting that we had on Friday. We had about 4 of them in January, February, and March. The first one was pretty much a introduction, not only to that toolkit that I mentioned, and get their take on it. And prior to that, our consultant brought it to the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee to get their input on it as well. But it was also an introduction to the Coastal Resiliency Plan, because it's really important to see the connection between Resilient Nantucket for the individual silo, if you will, of the structure and how it relates to the overall resiliency planning for the National Historic Landmark that is Nantucket. And then again, we had these meetings in February and March to go over this draft with the HDC. This was actually both an HDC and an NHC posted meeting for their input, and final comments were due this week. So hopefully everybody has been able a chance to take a look at it and give those final comments. I will say our consultants have been fabulous through this whole process. One thing to take away from this is the design guidelines are based on the national guidelines and standards. They also include the Preservation Institute Nantucket's projects that they've been working on, and they continue to work on, actually. A great asset to the town and the island. But it also incorporates the best practices from the state and our local design guidelines, including building with Nantucket in mind. And if you've taken a look at these design guidelines, which are available on the town's website, you'll see how it's formatted and how this is, and it's an addendum to building with Nantucket in mind. Don't get me wrong, but it's an easy to read, digest, and understand how this document was created and how it was formatted. So I wanted to bring up, recently you all are aware that we became a certified local government under the National Park Service. Again, thank you for your support in that effort. One of the greatest things that helps with is it helps us with our resiliency efforts. So right now, not only obviously we all know that we're a National Historic Landmark District, we also have a historic preservation program through our being a local district prior to the federal law in 1955. We have a lot of structures that are listed as contributing, but being a certified local government, it has actually helped in this process. So what this means is any structure that is in harm's way, so any structure that would have to comply with FEMA guidelines, if it's actually listed contributing as a historic structure within our National Historic Landmark, or certified local government area. That structure does not have to meet the 50% or more market value improvement. So that means that they can be exempt from that part of the building code. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to elevate. They can do dry floodproofing or wet floodproofing. There's other means of making a historic structure be compatible and adapt, if you will, to FEMA's standards, which is just, this is fantastic. And with this, the HDC, and I've reminded them, they will see more of these. For instance, recently there was a project on Union Street, historic structure built in the 1860s or so, had an existing basement. That basement, if it was not technically historic, would have to be reconstructed to accommodate FEMA standards. In this case, they're able to utilize that existing basement for all their utilities and provide the appropriate flood mechanisms and be fine and meet the building code. So they came in with their alteration. There's very, very sensitive addition, mind you, very, very sensitive, as well as their historic determination to the HDC. So they received 2 COAs for that. This is an example of the design guidelines, elevations of some historic structures within the NHL right now. I think the HDC commissioners, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they really like seeing this visual, these elevation projects. Their primary goal is to preserve and maintain the essential architectural character as much as possible and follow those design guidelines I mentioned from the National Park Service. And the National Park Service design guidelines are available on the town's website as well for reference for folks. They've been on there as soon as I found out about it in November 2019. I made sure it was available on the town's website. And that's also been guidance for folks before we've had our own design guidelines. They're very clear on what they recommend and what they don't recommend. And then, of course, other mitigation approaches other than elevation to keep Nantucket's historic character while meeting the flood risk requirements. And I think that's really big. So wrapping up, we had our final MVP forum. So that was the third component of this MVP action grant, was to really engage the public. And I think our consultants really knocked it out of the park. This was a virtual gathering where we had folks from all over the world, from the United Kingdom to the United States. And these were subject matter experts from Union Land Institute, Union Concerned Scientists in the University of Florida. We also had our project manager for the Coastal Resiliency Plan, Arcadis, was in attendance. It was a fantastic event. You can actually look on our website for all the PDFs, for all the presentations that were there. I want to give a big shout out to the town manager and Matt Fee for being there for us. I really do think it was a great event. These were all our sponsors. We were even sponsored by Preservation Massachusetts, as well as the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which was fantastic. I'm sorry, guys. Husband's away. And really, and thanks to our representatives. Both Dylan and Julian were in attendance to this. Simpatico, please, baby. Was also an online event along with NCTV. So it was a fantastic job. So our basically takeaway on the forum itself was that we need to adapt our communities at the scale, which I was talking about with the Coastal Resiliency Plan, and the building scale, which is those individual design guidelines. We need to invest in our resilience. We need to safeguard our affordable housing and recognize the cost of climate adaptation and look for further opportunities. This is where our project pretty much is right now. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my colleagues, Chuck Larson and Vince Murphy, for their continued collaborative effort. This has been a multiple department / just an initiative, if you will. It's been a fantastic project, even though it's all had to been virtually. So thank you for that windedness. I will stop share.
Oh, Holly, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation, even with your distractions, which were really cute. I'm just, you know, after serving on the HDC for so many years, I love seeing this. I remember when Captain Toby's got renovated and they were able to get a waiver to not have to pull it way out of the ground, and figure out ways to make that still function. Was just one anecdotal thing that I remember, and I'm really excited about all the work that everyone's doing and the programs that are out there. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Holly. Really good job sort of explaining it. Do you have the design guidelines? Can you click on that and share page 7? That has the picture of Grant Point. And everyone, if you haven't looked at the design guidelines, you should look at them. They are, so the pictures are worth, 1,000 words. It shows you sort of what we're dealing with in our kids' lifetimes. And so I think, this was one that just jumped out at me. Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. If you look there, this is not that far into the future. And so when I look at the guidelines, I think they're great, but they're for Nantucket in a lot of areas, they are going to be an interim step. And, so the question will be, where do these places move? Where eventually they're going to move to? And, we are fortunate that we've got a ton of land that hasn't been developed. We're going to be doing things. Our kids are going to be doing things that we would say, no way, it'll never happen. My suggestion, Holly, because you're taking comments, is I think when people raise these houses, these historic homes or non-historic, they should make sure that they leave them ready to be moved again. I think that the cribbing and everything else that goes in, that can be where the water flows if they're doing a wet setup. And I think, that type of, there should be a thought in specific areas that this isn't the end, that, this is going to have to be done again. A lot of these homes and anyone that would be putting in a cellar in some of these areas right now, I've lived next to wetlands and had wet cellars. Sheila will never do it again. I can't even talk to her about them anymore. And I think we have to be really, it's going to be real. I just think that it's very difficult. So we're going, so I think this is worth 1,000 words.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you for attending that last meeting on it. I know Val Oliver's with us tonight. Val, did you want to make any comments?
No, not really. I was here for moral support.
Okay. Well, thank you
You
for
did a great job.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Really, back to Matt's comments. Think of this as the granular level, these design guidelines for the individual structure, but then overall the coastal resiliency plans where we're going to see that area really wide planning. So they go hand in hand. Thank you for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, we have the town manager's report, some budget reports. Libby, do you want to introduce?
Sure. Thank you. So we've got third quarter budget reports for the current fiscal year, beginning with our island home. And I think our interim administrator, Bob Eisenstein, is going to, hey, Bob.
Hi, Libby, how are you?
He's going to take us through.
Yeah, I'll run you through. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just to preface this, I'll go through really more of just the larger comments comparing Q3 just to set the tone. I mean, obviously COVID has informed everything financially that's going on in the nursing over the last year. So it's kind of interesting where you go to last year, March 2020. So the last quarter of 2020 was when this began. So just read through some of the big numbers here. Total revenue for the third quarter was 896,636 compared to over 1 million last year. And that's a natural occurrence because the census stayed constant from the end of last year. And those patients we couldn't admit for close to 9 months. Actually, we just started a couple of months ago. So as that census just attritioned out through either patients dying or being discharged, that's the main difference for the difference in revenue. And I'll also talk about that just briefly in the difference of patient days and census. So it all corresponds. We did on the revenue side, year to date, 5.6 million. Now, we do have the certified public expenditures that was put in there. I could just take credit for that and say, see what a great year we had. I'm not going to do that. I'm just, so we obviously have to take that out when we're considering to compare same stores. The total expenses were 2.29 with an increase of 617,000. Now, that's because we posted a Barnstable County retirement payment into this year, FY21. The good news is if you take that out, professional services were down actually about $220,000 from last year. That's something we've worked hard on. We talked about decreasing the travel, nursing expenses, et cetera. So that's a good news situation. So the expenses overall was really decrease of about $78,000. And when I take out the, I don't know if we can go to the next slide. This kind of gives you the overall snapshot of year to date, but again, it's a little misleading because we have the CPE dollars and the actuals for this year. So I'm going to take those out and just kind of give you the general comparison of this year versus last fiscal year. So you can actually go to the next slide if you don't mind. Again, this shows you the difference just real quickly in the payer mix and the census breakdown. And all of this is attributed to, I think the average daily census, I did a run on the numbers in terms of daily number of residents last year, fiscal year averaged 39, whereas this fiscal year we averaged 36. And you can equate that exactly to the number of patient days. I think the total patient days was down about 1,200 days this year over last. Most of it in Medicare, because you got to keep in mind new admissions coming in are all most from NCH and most are coming in initially Medicare. And again, that corresponds to the higher revenue patients. So it's all really comes back to, unfortunately, to COVID. The good news before we move to the next slide, we've already gone up to 39 again this year. Towards the beginning of into April, we're freed up now on admitting folks. And so we anticipate the census to continue to go back to the 39. What we've decided to do is hold 2 patient rooms open just in case we need to have isolation rooms. So we will really be able to go to 41 this year. And I think we will be getting there pretty quickly. And that's actually a very positive sign because the Medicare numbers will increase as well. We can go on to the next slide, please. And what I did here is if you just kind of take the middle column, the FY 21 numbers, and I can compare it. You see that 2.8 in terms of receipts compared to last year. That was really only off. I think it said in the first slide, it's really only off about, I think it was 160,000 somewhere in there. So that's, you know, I have to say it's an amazing testament to the stability of the nursing home. The rest of the state of Massachusetts, unfortunately, with, you know, people got hit with COVID outbreaks. Some of the census in those buildings went down to 50% of the buildings on average. 50, 70% was the highest I've ever seen. The fact that we stayed consistent at 36 residents every day for the better part of the entire COVID year is just, you know, amazing. And I just have to say, I've got to, you know, that's a huge shout out to the staff here. I think hopefully all of you saw the nice article in Nantucket magazine. It was great, where they quoted residents and families. And that's very unusual. That's you know, thank God we were able to stabilize that because it could have been much, much worse. So the next slide, please. And this gives you, as we all know, the expense breakdown because of the payroll and benefits and medical insurance. That's a higher number here than most, just to give you the, it's usually around 75%. If you combine the 66 and 15, you know, you're running 81%. So it's just it's a high number. So to offset that on our revenue side is just a little more of a challenge here than I think in other nursing homes. Nothing else unusual really with the other expenses that strikes me. Next. And again, this is just the aggregate numbers shown in a little bit different way. The total expenses for FY21 compared to FY20, you can see we were 78,000 to the good. So really, if you take the 78,000 that were better on expenses and subtract that from the revenue that we were off from, it's my message is honestly, compared to the rest of the industry, that's a pretty strong position for the nursing home to get through this COVID year with those types of numbers. Next slide, please. Oh, pretty picture. I just wanted to add a couple other quick comments. They're not financial, but there's been some significant changes that if people aren't aware of, I just wanted to make sure you are aware. First off, tomorrow is actually my last day here, and it's a good thing I'm getting out of town, because I looked at that slide of the flooding I'm on Westchester. I'm thinking, oh my God. But I wanted to just say thank you to all of you, to you, Libby, personally, to Rachel, you guys have been very supportive of this home. I know I can speak for the entire staff here. They feel the support, they feel the love, and they've done a great job here. They all know how I feel about them. I'm going to miss them terribly. The new administrator taking over for me, his name is David Carbonell, and he's here this week. I'm doing a transition with him. It's Carboneau. He's got family from, I think, from French Canada, Quebec. He is under Eisenstein Flaherty. He'll be still under our company. We also have appointed a new director of nurses. Her name is Doris Enos, and most of you know that Heather moved on to a position with the town. And the general opening of visitors has been fabulous. We are now having in-person visitors in the building. We have a whole system for making sure there's precautions. People who are fully vaccinated, and this fully vaccinated resident, they can meet in their room. And by the way, we only have 2 residents out of the initial 36 that refused their vaccinations. Out of the staff, we're up to 80% of our staff now fully vaccinated, which is, again, phenomenal. We've had more and more trickling in as they see the other ones. There's no side effects, and we've had 0 complications. All Pfizer, by the way, here, the in-house staff and residents, all the Pfizer double dosing. Michelle Monroe is here as the assistant administrator. That's an excellent, excellent addition, because she can help us tie into all the town stuff, which I can't figure out. So someone else can figure it out for us. It's wonderful. And she works very closely with Libby and Rachel. And then a couple other quick things. We're getting a delivery of 45 new hospital beds tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And we look back at, you don't realize how old the equipment is. The beds, I think, are from pre-1999 even. We couldn't even find the old invoices. They've been good. They've been sturdy. But these new beds are going to be fabulous. They're what we call high-low beds. So all of them can go down to the ground fully, which is terrific for fall preventions. And the last thing is, we are in our window for a resurvey from the Department of Public Health. So we're getting ready for that. And I'll be open to questions, but I really just wanted to say it's been a great experience for me personally. Yes, sir.
Matt?
Yeah, I wish you weren't going, Bob. You've done such a great job. We've been so fortunate to have you, and you've put us. It feels like you've put us on really good, solid footing going forward, and I want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. As I tell everybody, write the note to my wife. Don't ask me. No, it's been. I thank you for those comments, and again, I just have to give us the staff. Yeah, I think the article talked about how different it is here, because, and I've learned this in terms of my own business for other nursing homes. It's when people make excuses, that's all it is. The people have such a passion here for caring for these residents. They're like family. I think I said that before on one of the presentations. That's the difference. And you can replicate that. When people tell me that's not replicable, that's not true. We can do that in other places, and we have to, actually. So, but I thank you for your comments, Matt.
Bob, I would echo those. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and getting us through such a difficult year.
Yeah.
no one knew where we would be at. And I know that people are really thrilled that they, now that loved ones are vaccinated, they're able to come in and visit. It's been so long, and I think that I've just heard really great.
Without breaching HIPAA, we had our 100-year-old resident had her son fly up from South Carolina, and it was just, the whole place was in tears. It just, they got to hug. It's like, that's fine. We're not going to say not hug. He came all this way, So it's been great. Yeah. Thank you, Christy.
Any other questions on the budget or other comments? Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Bob. We'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you, Libby.
You haven't seen the end of us.
I didn't think so, Libby. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay. Finance Director Brian Tarbett is going to take us through the general fund report.
Thank you, Libby. Good evening, everyone on the board. On the first 9 months of the general fund, revenues are 77 million, which is a small decrease over the first 9 months in fiscal 20. One of those reasons is as everybody in the board does know, the tax bills, due to some transition and timing with getting the approval from the Bureau of Local Assessment, the tax bills were mailed a little later than normal, and that has delayed the payment in the due date for the third quarter into the fourth quarter. So we did expect and plan for a reduction in property taxes payments through the March 31st quarter. I can tell you that it is that we have seen a tremendous pickup in April and May in the collections. So it certainly is coming in, and some of the larger mortgage companies did not pay them necessarily on March 31st, but paid them very, very soon after. So overall, we are tracking very, very close to revenue. Local estimated receipts, mainly attributed to local rooms taxes, performing far in what we had expected when we went to town meeting last year. So overall, on a revenue side, I do expect that we are going to end the year in a favorable position and very close, if not ahead of where we had expected to be. Some of it will be dependent on where the final tax collections come in. I will tell everybody that the first quarter excise tax commitment number 1, which, as I explain every year, is always the largest excise tax commitment, went out. And that commitment consisted of 18,899 bills, which actually, for the first time, I think, since I've been here, and I know that we always kind of have this discussion, Matt, is 661 fewer bills than it was last year in the commitment. That commitment was made up $2,404,000, and last year's commitment was $2,540,000. So this year we did see a decrease in the number of bills and the dollars, but the collections are very active in coming in. So we're confident in where the revenue is going to end up for the end of the year at this point. General fund expenses are tracking very close to where we expect them to be. There is a decrease. There is one thing that needs to be posted, which is just the transfer to the enterprise funds. So it's not anything that's going to materially change the budget or is unexpected. There was a large increase, as Bob noted, as was in the Island Home. It's also consistent through all of the enterprise funds and the rest of the operation. The Barnstable County retirement payment was posted. Last year, during COVID, when we were unsure necessarily what cash flow would look like in July, which is the largest month for expenditures going out the door, or one of them, we made the decision to split the payment into 2. Normally, we take advantage of a reduction to save on interest costs, but given we weren't sure exactly how collections were going to be through the end of the year, we did pay that over 2 payments. So that has contributed to an increase a larger increase than we'd anticipated. Everything else, Erica, could you move down to expenses? Keep going, please. Next one. Everything else is in line with where we expect it to be. We're watching and working with all the departments very closely as we get closer to the end of the year, monitoring their POs, requests for POs, and the expenses that they're putting through to make sure that everybody manages to the budgets, and we don't expect any real surprises before the end of the year at this point. Next slide, please, Eric. As we always do, we present to the board some of the top projects that have been for expenditures that have been worked on over the quarter. Stormwater improvement was $814,000. DPW was doing a lot of work on road maintenance and cobblestone repairs and sidewalk repairs. The repairs at 16 Broad Street are relative to the underground storage tank removal and $231,000. And then some various roof repairs and cost to replace engine 7 and multi-use paths. Also where work was done on all of those over the course of this last 3-month period. Next slide. That might be it. No change to the credit rating. We also think that we will be doing a bond issue in June, which is typically when we do one right before the end of the year. We don't have any reason to expect that Moody's will make any changes given the favorable condition that we believe we're working towards and will continue to maintain. We don't expect to have a rating from Standard & Poor's anytime soon, although we do expect they may do a surveillance phone call just to try to update their information at some point in the future. Next slide, Erica. And then just the investment report. Investments are, according to our advisor, doing fairly well and holding steady and trying to, within the legal list, they did have returned 6.17%, which is good in the stocks and bonds that he's able to buy. So we're pleased with the performance with OPEB and the stabilization funds and all the other funds that are maintained there. I will tell you that, as I'm sure everybody is aware, we did have some transition in the finance office. And now that we do have somebody in the financial analyst and budget position, the Muni Watch is currently being updated. They're working very hard on getting it and updating it. And so that it's my expectation that with the fourth quarter that we will have that, we'll revise or we'll start including that with the report. As they were putting this together, being their first time, the hope was that they concentrated directly on the report and then worked on the Muni Watch. I know the Muni Watch is something everybody likes to see, and it will be included with that next report.
Are there any questions? Jason?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, maybe you said and I missed it. The was the 4.6 million increase in Q3 on that big jump in the graph. What was that for?
Which graph are you?
Double payment or something?
What was that? I'm sorry, Jason.
There was in the salary.
Yes.
There was a $4.5 million jump from last year.
Which is attributable to the retirement assessment, which was over $5 million that was paid out.
And it just went in that quarter, or that's just an additional thing we were expecting or not, or
we were expecting it. It was a little bit higher than normal. It was we actually split it into 2 payments, and then it was inadvertently posted into the third quarter, a portion of it. So that was actually the 2 payments combined. It was higher, partially because we did pay some interest because to make sure that July is typically one of the largest months for cash going out the door with insurance payments for property and all of those, and other costs going out the door, going out through the AP warrant process. We made the decision to make sure that we could fund all of those and payroll and everything. So we split this into 2 payments, and we did pay more in interest by doing that. This year, we will be making it all in one lump payment like we normally have. So.
Yeah, on that topic, Brian, are you like a business? You try to put that in as soon as you can, so you get the extra time for it to grow?
We try to put it in so that we actually save money, because if you split it into 2 payments, you're paying substantially more because they're charging you interest on that second half payment. And normally we plan to pay it all up front so that we get a discount on the payment for paying it all up front. So, but again, like I said, with the uncertainty, I wanted to make sure that we had the cash to be able to continue to operate. And so that was a decision that the treasurer and I made, but we have planned for going back to that one-time payment to reduce the cost.
Right. No, and that's that's, I agree. That was a smart thing to do. What I'm putting, the reason I'm saying it is if you look at, you look at the difference between putting your retirement money in at the very last minute versus putting it in at the beginning of the year, and over time, over 20, 30 years, that ends up, power of compound interest, that ends up being a huge positive if you can do it.
Yes.
And then what percent, I know I asked this, the advisory fees are about 10 grand. What's our percent based on how much they're running?
There's over $11 million that they're managing. And we're only being charged, Matt, when they actually execute trades or rebalance the portfolio. So we're not being charged unless they do have any active work in the portfolio. So it's very reasonable in terms of the amount that they're managing for us.
Yeah, it's almost a basis point, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Then the other thing is that I know, just you note on this, the rooms tax did great. The restaurants took a hit.
They did.
They're down, 25, 30, what is it, 30%, that, and that's sort of what we have sort of felt and seen all this year. A lot of, some industries did fine through this, but restaurants was not one of them. So it'll be nice to have them back and have them safe and back this summer. Will be very good for them.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Brian. Mark Willett will take us through Wanacommet and Sconset, which are soon to be merged in the fiscal 22 budget.
Yeah, thank you, Libby. I'd like to start just by thanking Brian and his team for putting all this information together and helping us with everything he does. Day to day, every time we call Brian and those guys, they do a great job for us. So the quarter has been very busy for us this whole year to date. Revenues are up quite a bit. Our water use fee is up over $400,000, and our connection fees are up over $200,000. Year to date, we've put in about 160 new connections and 101 deduct meters. The deduct meters are probably one of the fastest growing revenue streams for us. We've been putting a lot of those in, especially in that last third quarter, kind of towards the end of the second and through the third, and they're continuing now. And I think that's going to continue to grow. I've talked with David a little bit over at the sewer department. These are meters that we really didn't plan for in the budget. People are getting more into doing what they can do to manage their sewer bills and water bills combined. So the deduct meter seems to be a pretty popular option now. Almost every new tap we do, they take a deduct meter as well. So that's moving forward. One thing with our meters, if you guys recently in the news, you hear about the microchips in the cars and the automakers having trouble. Those same microchips are in our smart meters. So our meters have been put on hold, purchasing meters. It takes about 14 weeks to receive meters now. We have a good supply, but we have put in another order that'll actually show up in the fourth quarter stuff. But the meters are doing well. Revenue's doing well. We're going in a good way. As far as expenses, there are a few line items that were up. Obviously, our inventory line is up a little bit. Putting in all these meters, putting in all the services. The guys are actually out tonight right now, putting in 2 services on Fairgrounds Road on a night job. So we're pretty busy with those. So the inventory line is up for expenses. Professional services, we continue to whittle that down every year and doing more and more ourselves in-house. Overall, I think we're in a strong place. You got to remember the water use fees includes the summer, which I had mentioned before, June, July, August, September, October of last year were all the monthly totals in those months were bigger than any other month that Wanacommet has ever seen. So I think from what I'm gathering from everybody and seeing the increased traffic around the island, I think that's going to continue this summer. So I think we're going to be in a good place for a few years. And that's pretty much what I got for Wanna if anybody has questions.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Okay,
Tom Rafter?
Sconset.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I tried to cut you off from Sconset.
Oh, that's okay. Sconset's quick. Not a lot of services going in Sconset. I think we've done 3 year to date out at the new subdivision in Sconset. Their revenue's doing fine. They were very similar to us. Water use was up substantially over the summer and late into the fall. So that's helped, and it continued through the winter in Sconset. The one difference between town and Sconset is we almost got back to normal numbers for a few months in town over, February, March. Sconset never really slowed down. I think more people stayed year-round in Sconset than have in quite a while. So other than that, Sconset's in a good place.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Yep.
Airport Manager Tom Rafter will take us through the airport budget report.
Thank you, Libby. As of the end of third quarter, revenues were down about 18% or $2.4 million over last year. This was mainly driven by our fuel revolver cap, which we had to adjust down to 3.5, and that's one you just approved. Thank you, going up to 4 million so that we can get fuel purchased before the end of this year. Additionally, though, our passenger facility charges were down about 369,000, and our fee rental income was down about 462,000. Again, all driven by the pandemic. Operations were down about 30%, and employments were down about 57%. On the other side, though, the expenses were also down, so that's a good thing. They were down about 2.5 million. Main drivers there, again, were payroll expenses, which due to reimbursements through the CARES Act, we were very fortunate to receive that money, and the payroll is down about 1.3 million. We submitted and have been reimbursed a total of 1.277 million in CARES Act for salaries. Additional 1 million is being processed right now, but are not reflected in the third quarter updates. And again, the main driver in the reduction in the expenses is the fuel purchases, which were down by about 1.2 million. But the reason we're asking, or we've asked for that increase in the cap, was all the indications we're showing are that our fuel sales are going up quickly, and we need to have enough on hand to be able to purchase that. So overall, if you look at the next page, the summary, you'll see again our revenues were 2 million below last year at this time. However, we're still above the total budget, so that's a good thing. We're at $10.8 million. The overall budget was $9 million. And expenses are tracking right about where they should be, about 7.8 million, below last year significantly, but also not, we still have room in our budget. Net earnings, $3.3 million as opposed to 2.7 last year. When we bring in the transfers and the other things such as passenger facility charge, we're showing a surplus of about 2.4 million as opposed to 1.7 last year. Add that to the retained earnings, and the balance projected is about 5.3 million. But as we all know, we're going into our busy season, so that's not going to be the end of the year number. I wish I could say it was, but we're going to probably, we most likely though will still have a strong retained earnings for this year. And again, the majority of that is because of the support we received from the CARES Act funding. So things are going good, but we are also expecting an extremely busy summer. To everyone else's point, the traffic that you see already, JetBlue begins service tomorrow. That's probably one of the earliest times they've started. And during our peak, we will have at least 21 flights a day, and that does not include the Cape Air or Southern or Elite. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Tom. Oh, Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, when it's going to be a busy summer, is it mainly 3 of the major carriers that are coming more than usual? Is that the biggest factor?
We're seeing a couple of things. The main driver are the four seasonal carriers, JetBlue, United, American, and Delta. They all have expanded. In fact, we have 2 airlines now that will be flying to Chicago, United and American. That's the first. JetBlue has added Newark service. United has added a Washington service. We have a new carrier, Elite, coming in. Southern is back with some additional service. And then on the other side of the house, the corporate and private, I don't expect it to continue at the percentage growth, but throughout the winter, we have seen almost doubling of our fuel sales. Now, again, it's all relative, but it has been very strong through the winter, which is not a normal, characteristic. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
I would just say I really love the format of all of these reports and the way the information is presented. So thank you to all of the departments and particularly the finance department who helps compile it all. I guess we're on to select board reports and comments. I believe Tom Tucker Holland is on now. Review approval of comment letter to Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, regarding Habitat for Humanity's Nantucket's local initiative program application for Benjamin Drive 3-unit housing development with the Nantucket Housing Authority's Maya Common Village 40B development. And I'm hoping, Tucker, you can touch a little bit on the visit yesterday as well.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think the title actually sort of says it all in terms of the action item. This is a comment letter in conjunction with the 3-unit housing development which Habitat is doing on land at Benjamin Drive. This is really a very cooperative effort between the Housing Authority, Housing Nantucket, Habitat, and the Affordable Housing Trust. All of those entities are playing a part here. These are the first 3 units that Habitat will be doing, which will be subsidized housing inventory eligible. So this is kind of a big deal. And you all have already sent in a letter of support which accompanied the local initiative program application for these units. So the letter that we're asking you to support today is the traditional comment letter that the municipality would provide in conjunction with the LIP review at DHCD. Would you like to discuss the action item and then the report on the visit?
Yeah, why don't if anyone has any questions on the action item, or if we could just go to a motion. Matt?
Approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. So that carries unanimously. But Tucker, I just thought you'd like to take the opportunity to talk about the visit from DHCD yesterday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really would like to thank the board and the town manager and everybody who was involved in yesterday's visit. 2 representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, Alana Murphy and Rieko Hayashi, had come down in conjunction with the site visit for this project. But given their presence on the island, we really wanted to take the opportunity to show them all that Nantucket is doing. And we had about a 6-hour day with them. It was nonstop, going between Habitat, 31 Fairgrounds, Beach Plum Village, 6 Fairgrounds, the Richmond project, 135, 137 Orange Street, the UMass site, and meetings in between. They were, I believe, just very impressed with everything that is happening here, the support that the town and the community our giving to housing was very much noticed, and it's terrific that we have the relationship that we do with DHCD, and that's really a result of everybody's contributions to this. So I just again would like to thank you all and thank everyone who was involved in the day yesterday. I know that our guests really appreciated it.
Thank you. Thank you. The way you had it laid out was fantastic. And I see Brooke Moore has her hand up, so I'd love to take a comment from Brooke as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to say that I think one of the things that I was proudest to talk about with these folks is the level of collaboration and cooperation in the housing arena on Nantucket among the various organizations, town administration, on the funding side, the CPC, that we collaborate at the level that we do to bring these projects forward. They pointed out as very, very unusual and good to see. And I'm just really proud of the entire community of housing advocates for where we've come in the last number of years. And a special shout out to Renee Seeley, who is the holder of so much history in what's gone on in the housing space going back quite a long time, who was able to share a lot of that history, which I didn't know. So anyway, it was a great day.
Christy?
Thank you. And I just wanted to add, it was truly a great day, and it was great to see the relationships that we've built with the DHCD representatives over the last couple of years. And one of the comments they made was, I think they were here 4 or 5 years ago, and just what we've done in the past few years has really just accelerated affordable housing on Nantucket, and that we're not just focused on, the shy list 10%, but we're really talking about workforce availability. And we're able to show them so many different sites. And I think that goes back to, thanking the citizens that put forward that warrant article to provide the funding. And with that, it really started the conversation of what do we want to see affordable housing look like on Nantucket. And now we have a lot of articles going forward this year that will hopefully provide, more substantial funding long-term. And so it was just really great to have all the different properties to show and not just talk about what we envisioned, but actually show them what we're doing.
Very well said. Thank you, Christy. And thanks again, Tucker. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing this habitat come to fruition for those 3 families. Next up, we were just going to have a little board discussion about what it might look like to go back to in-person, when everyone's thinking that might be a reality. I also was hoping John Giorgio could give us a little bit of insight into if the state of emergency, or when the state of emergency gets lifted. I think we're required to go back to in-person, but are there any provisions that might be coming that would change that? And sort of pros and cons of public access this way versus public access in person. And I just thought after Roberto said that we could, meet the rules right now and go back to in-person, I didn't think that anybody was anywhere close to being ready to do that, but it was time to just start to have the conversation, and as the policy-making board for the town, to be able to start the dialogue for all of the other boards to help guide their discussions about when and if they might want to meet in person. So, John, I don't know if you have any thoughts on whether, there might be a drop, like the drop of the state of emergency, and boom, we've got to go in on Wednesday night. And then I'll go to you, Matt.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So, as everyone knows, the ability to meet remotely is a result of an emergency. I think it was the first emergency order that the governor issued, and that's now 14 months ago. I have anecdotally seen only a limited return to physical meetings with my clients at least, most of them are still at this point doing the Zoom meetings. But there is, I have not heard of anything from at the state level indicating when that state of emergency is going to be lifted. And if it is, whether or not they would look for further relief from the open meeting law. I think it's the $64,000 question right now in my experience, Dawn, but there is for example, the town of Harwich Select Board are now meeting in person. But most of the towns that I deal with are continuing with remote meetings, at least for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, John. Matt, and then Christy.
Yeah, I think my sense, and this is just, just my gut, I'll be shocked if we get to August 1st. I think that I think the state, with what's happening in Connecticut opening and New Jersey and other places, it's going to put a lot more pressure, on the state of Massachusetts. And I think we should expect to be opened, more fully, if not all the way, sooner than August 1st. Yeah, it'd be just my gut reaction. I'm comfortable going as soon as everyone else is. I've been vaccinated, and I'm sure we'll have people be 6 feet apart and everything else. I'm willing to go when the rest of the board feels comfortable.
Thanks, Matt. Christy?
Thank you. This question is for John. I'm just wondering how Harwich is doing their meetings. Is it just the select board that's meeting and they're still doing it via Zoom, or is the public coming to their meetings?
So right now it's just the select board that are meeting. And they do have the Zoom, they do go to meeting, but they do have that capability, and people can I'll say Zoom into the meeting. But the board is meeting in their meeting room with the appropriate social distancing.
Matt, then Jason.
Here's a question for John. I know businesses are allowed to say you can enter if you've been vaccinated. Some are, some aren't. Could we could we limit who enters enters the room based on vaccination status?
Yeah. So Matt, right now I'd say the answer is no. As a public body, of course, private businesses are different, and they can establish their own rules as long as they're not unlawfully discriminating against anyone. But the best advice I can give you now is that requiring a vaccination to attend a meeting is not something that I think would pass legal muster at this point.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I personally am okay of going back into next week to go in person. However, I'm trying to think what is the best option for the most amount of people. And I think we've created an additional level of access for people to be in their homes and come in, whether it's just basic access or they feel more comfortable just virtually raising their hand and speaking and not having to be on camera. I think there is maybe some people who aren't who need help with the technology, and that might be a hurdle for them. But I think it gives more access to the versus those who maybe can't figure it out or have some hurdles there. So I'm going to kind of push us to stay remote as long as we possibly can. I just think it gives more access. But I would want to hear from people who are the stakeholders. I'd want to hear from the departments, from town admin, like what's more efficient for everyone. And I know we might have to go back in person. It might not be our choice, but looking through that lens of Affordable Housing Trust, the CAPCOMs, all the committees that are during the day, I would love for those to be able, if we can, to keep those remote. That would be very effective for a 10 o'clock CAPCOM meeting, not have to leave your office, and I can just jump in and jump back out. And I also think that'll allow people to participate in those type of committees as well. So I like the access, but I don't know if we can do a survey or just try to talk to as many people as we can on what they think of going back versus staying remotely.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. All really good points. Brooke Moore has her hand up, so maybe we'll have some public input.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a lot of thoughts on this from a lot of different perspectives. I'll try to be brief. This remote access to meetings has increased participation, both from the public, but also it gives access to people to serve on committees in a new way who can't do so. For instance, a mom with kids at home who can put her kids to bed and log into a Council for Human Services meeting and participate as a member in a way that she can't do because she would have to get a babysitter or to go to a physical meeting. So I realize a lot of this is out of our control because it's legislated, the requirements and legally codified. But I think trying to figure out a way to increase or make it more flexible to both serve and participate in public meetings forever in some kind of hybrid format. We're doing the same at my church, actually. We want to capitalize on the fact that people have been coming to Zoom church and want them to be able to continue after we're back in the building. So I think it's worth investigating and figuring out if there's advocacy we need to do on a policy level to maintain this kind of remote accessibility to both members and the public. We should try to get ahead of the curve on that before we're all required to go back to the old ways. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a really good point of whether we should be writing any kind of a letter or offering any kind of input to our state legislature in regard to what we'd like to see for abilities. I mean, I definitely like the idea of a lot of the smaller meetings having the ability to jump on Zoom. It's silly for everybody to drive and get to a certain place for like a 10-minute meeting in a lot of these cases. Matt, Christy, then Erica. Sorry.
I think our policy already allows some remote. I don't know if it's what is it a percent or not? That might be what Eric was going to talk about. I think it already does allow it. I hadn't thought of doing a hybrid, but could you be on Zoom and also on the camera? Like we could still be on Zoom and one of us could be at home. And I think there's still a way to do both. If you had your computer opened on your, at the desk out at the police station, I think you could still run it both ways potentially. I don't know.
There may be some challenges with having public in person and public on Zoom and running the meetings, but Christy?
Thanks. I was going to echo kind of what Brooke was saying. I think that this has increased participation, not just, attending our board meetings, which we've seen way more public participation via Zoom than we did at the police station, but also getting people involved and interested in either running for boards or appointments for committees. So I would love to see us explore a hybrid model if that could help increase the participation. And I think we should start to talk to the state legislators about what could be possible post-COVID. I'm comfortable going back to in-person, but I agree with others that we should kind of put it off as long as we can and use this benefit for as long as possible. We've talked a lot over the last several months that, COVID kind of poked holes in things and exposed some inefficiencies. And I think some of that is the way that we hold our public meetings is that not everybody has access to us the way that they've had over the past year. So I think it's something that we have to look at.
Thank you, Christy. Erica, and then I'll go to John Giorgio.
I was just going to note on Brooke's point about, having members being able to participate. I mean, we had Holly here tonight who, wouldn't have been able to participate because, she was home watching her children. It also brings to thought when we have consultants, and Rachel brought this up earlier, we have so many consultants that literally come here and are here for, hours waiting to come to the select board. They're here for 20 minutes and then they get back on the ferry to leave. Giving them the ability to participate remotely would not only make it easier on them, but it would be more cost effective for us. The one hiccup in our remote participation policy is that it still requires a quorum of the public body to be physically present to allow people to participate remotely. So that is a challenge within the open meeting law once the emergency order is lifted.
Right, right. But we could maybe come up with some layout where at least 3 board members are in the community room, but we'd have to figure out the technology piece of it. John?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that the Attorney General has indicated that at least with respect to a public hearing, you cannot have members of the public on Zoom and physically present in the meeting. It's one or the other. The board can convene a public hearing in the hearing room and everyone else participate remotely. That is permitted, but you can't have sort of a half and half situation with respect to members of the public. Now, that could change depending upon what the legislature wants to do here. So I think it's an excellent suggestion to contact your legislative delegation to find out what may be in the offing with respect to remote participation.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for John. Do you think it would make sense or would be more feasible to ask for appointed committees? So elected bodies that are elected maybe have to meet, maybe have different rules, but something that's appointed, say the Cannabis Advisory Committee could meet remotely, or is it pretty much flat across, everything's the same? Open meeting
So
law?
Jason, of course, the open meeting law does not have a different set of rules for appointed versus elected boards. Any town board, whether elected or appointed, are subject to the same rules. And I suspect that the legislature would want to keep that the way it is. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, thanks.
So this was a start to this conversation. I thought that we should be the leaders in our community discussion of it, as I'm sure other boards will start to want to know what may be happening going forward. I think that it would be wise if we make some contact with Dylan and Julian and see what they think might be getting proposed, if anything. And I'd love to take this up again when Melissa's here to get her input. Does that seem fair? And would love to hear from more people out there in the public as well on the pros and cons of your experience. John?
I can make some inquiries within the firm to see if anybody else has some better learning on this than I do, and there may be some discussion among other state reps. So I will undertake to do that, and I can send Libby an email with anything that I glean from that.
Thank you so much. I mean, there may be some towns who want to sign on jointly to request or to give input. Before we close this, Deanne Atherton has raised her hand. Deanne, do you have some thoughts?
You hear me, Dawn?
Yes, I can now.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a good discussion about whether you meet in person or continue sort of this virtual meeting. But I think underlining everything is a commitment that the board has to transparency and to involving the public to the greatest extent possible. And one example I want to just cite is just this evening, there was an item on the agenda about the new policy for the appointments process. And I happen to know it's not an issue I have been that engaged with right now, but there were 3 people who had logged on to participate in a discussion of that. And it was taken off the agenda to be reconsidered and I guess brought forth later. But that just doesn't signal a commitment to public participation and transparency. And again, I think that's the underlying core value. I was at a Superior Court hearing this morning that involved an issue that's of great concern to many, many islanders involving our public beach in Sconset. And yes, that is litigation and it is subject to executive session, but there has been no public discussion about developments in regard to this matter, which is disconcerting. So I would hope that whether the board goes forward with some kind of hybrid configuration for meetings, that the underlying core value is transparency and inclusion of the public in the decisions that are made by the select board.
Thank you for your comments, Deanne. I'm a little bit perplexed about that first comment about taking something off the agenda. I thought it was very, very clear on the reasoning why we took that off for tonight. A number of letters came in post packet posting, and also our representative from the board who worked on the little internal work group is not with us tonight. And we do intend to bring that back after further review. But Jason, did you?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think we pulled that off the agenda in the name of transparency because Melissa, wasn't able to make it. We found that out, just before the meeting.
4 o'clock.
And what's that?
She let me know at 4 o'clock that she wouldn't be able to attend tonight.
And if we were to be in person, the same thing would have happened. I got so many emails today about this particular subject that I didn't get to review, and I wouldn't have been able to talk about it. So I didn't want to rush through it tonight, as you didn't want to either, Dawn. So I think in the name of transparency, we pulled that off and said it in the beginning. That way, the people who were here knew they could leave, and it would be on a future agenda. So I think it was actually a good thing that we did that.
Libby?
A tiny plug for remote is that those people did not have to actually come to Fort Fairgrounds Road and find they didn't need to be there.
Deanne, did you want to have a follow-up on that?
Yes, thank you, Dawn, and thank you for those comments, Jason and Libby. Will the matter of the revised policy on committee appointments be on the agenda for next week?
No.
Okay, well, aren't we up against a timeline? I mean, May 21st is the deadline, as I understand it, for the submission for the first group of applicants.
It will probably be on in 2 weeks for the continued appointment discussion in terms of a change in policy, aside from the policies that are already in place.
Thank you.
Thanks. Speaking of, we have committee reports as the final item on our agenda. I do have one thing I wanted to mention tonight. Libby and I attended a meeting yesterday. It's sponsored by the Community Foundation. It's a behavioral health steering committee. They've engaged a firm from Colorado and asked both Libby and myself, and as well as our public safety officials and people from the hospital, Fairwinds, Gosnold, A Safe Place. I'm sure I'm missing some people, but it was a really great group and a really great discussion. A press release went out yesterday afternoon about it, and they're in the process of identifying what our needs are, where our gaps are, where our overlaps are, and I'm really, really excited about the undertaking. I think that it will be a great community effort, and and give us some guidance on what we need to do as a community going forward. What kind of additional things we need to provide, and whether there needs to maybe be some kind of a facility in the future on Nantucket. Anybody else have committee reports? All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Nat Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you. See you all tomorrow.